I'm Charlotte Cheney with Charlotte's Soul, and I have the ability to reflect upon what it was like to recover from the effects of traumatic abuse and neglect. And I am publicly sharing that journey because I know that there's a lot of people that have suffered worse trauma than I have, but what happens to the body is pretty similar. And one of the things is you just sort of accept a negative situation, a toxic situation. You just think it's love, or you hope it's love, or you think you're going to love them enough that they're going to love you back. And when you're dealing with narcissism, which is something specific that is really full of hate, even in a parent-child marriage, any kind of relationship, it is narcissism. And so it is coming out with just wickedness of one person treating another person while the other person thinks they love them. You're like, who's so stupid that would think that somebody loved you when they're like hurting you all the time? But the reality is most abuse victims are something we call an empath. And so they have this enormous ability to empathize with other people. And so a narcissist, that's what they go after, because an empath is very trustworthy, but also very trusting. And so an empath isn't going to be going around thinking that their father like doesn't love him and is trying to control him for his own satisfaction. They're going to be like, well, a father loves a daughter, and so he loves me. And sure, it doesn't always feel that way. Oh, now in my recovery, I can look back and I can be like, wow, it never looked that way. But I was just, it's so hopeful. I was so emotionally and mentally damaged from the way I was treated by the first man in my life, who I don't think wanted the light that God has ordained to put inside of me shining in the darkness of that money worshiping empire. It's a bit of a cult. I didn't think it was a cult at all until I broke away and was rejected by every other person who stayed loyal to my abuser. Now, this is exactly what happens to everyone in a narcissistically abusive environment. Okay, so the abuser goes out and grooms the population that is associated with this relationship. So, it could be at work, it could be in your family. A lot of times it's in families. And so the narcissist is a big shot. Everybody looks to them like they're God. And then maybe they're going to pick out a scapegoat. Maybe there's someone like me that's carrying a little too much light to maintain the level of darkness going on, right? And so what the narcissist will do is make that individual into a scapegoat and will take out everything on that person. And if something's wrong, the entire group ultimately on some level joins in ganging up on that scapegoat, whether it's just jokes and sarcasm or like leaving them out of something or not planning something to make sure they could come because you value their presence. So like that, and so that's neglect. And that hurts. It really does hurt. Like, just not being invited, not being included, not being valued. And I know now that I have gotten away from it, that I was ordained with a unique light. And it was always put out and criticized, and you're too sensitive, and you're too this, and you're too that. You're insignificant. You're big. You've got bad skin. Nobody's interested in someone like you. That's the message I received from the man who in many relationships adores his daughter more than anything. And I didn't know that's not what was going on in my relationship until there was just 3 very obvious things that happened. And I'm like, okay, I've got an option here. I couldn't. There was no more options. It's like, babe, we got to get you out of denial. And I know now in my recovery that the Lord needed to do that. I think that the episodes that I experienced were like being clobbered from behind over the head with a frying pan from my father. The first one happened in August of 2019 when, having never been invited to a second home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I get an invitation in the middle of a very, very busy season, but it required me leaving my husband for 3 nights. And I was like, I've never had the invitation. Everybody else had. There had already been a house that had been used and downsized, and I was never invited to see any of it. And I know now they didn't want my light in there. But I didn't know it at the time. I was just like, maybe there's something I can do to get invited. Well, sure enough, in August of 2019, I get this invitation. Can Brian come? No. And so it's just my sister and me and my stepmother and my dad. And I mean, for the first couple of days, I cannot even tell you, we had the best time. I was like, this is awesome. They finally like me, like maybe it's because I was healing and everything, being married to Brian. But on the day before it was time to come home, there was just something shifted. And my sister took me out to breakfast and she's like, you're really angry. Meanwhile, I'm on top of the world. In addition to soaking up this special attention from my family as I'd never had before, ever, really, except maybe when I had cancer. But I'm like loving this, and I'm like, what are you even talking about? And I know now I was being gaslit because this whole thing was going to come down that Brian didn't marry me for love, and no one as wonderful as you seem to think he is would be interested in someone like you. Exactly what I heard from my dad when he was trying to explain to me that my husband didn't love me. And I was like, I couldn't fathom it. I really couldn't fathom. I mean, my gosh, if he doesn't love me, he is one heck of a pretender. I'm like, I couldn't, but is my dad telling me that? Warning me that I'd made a mistake. You thought the last one loved you. Look how that turned out. It was pretty damaging. But I couldn't see anything outside of the rose-colored glasses that I was still using to remain in an altered reality in a relationship with my family. At that point, I'd understood the abuse I have endured in my marriage. The abuse does not end with divorce. It only ends when the abuser loses control over manipulating the victim, which for many, many people just either never happens or just doesn't happen for a very long time. So if you are leaving a narcissist, you've got to get well. You can't just like be apart from them and think things are going to stop hurting. No. And the truth is, and this is the very, very important truth you need to know, those first several months after you've come out of the closet, now you're like, hey, I'm abused. I can't take this anymore. And every single person you know stands with your abuser. Every single one of them. Not a one of them is willing to even think out of the box that you're telling the truth. And they'll come in and they'll try and change your mind, especially if you're a Christian, right? They don't want to look that seriously at their own situations. They just can't tolerate it. You've got to stay together. You have to stay together. And I'll tell you, for years, I had that going on in my first marriage. But finally, I got to this point where this is post stage 3B rectal cancer, and I had Lyme disease. I was so ill. I was so ill, mentally, physically, everything. I was just unwell. And I was like, Lord, what do you want me to do? I'd done everything. I was like the Proverbs 31 wife. I cannot tell you. And the only feedback I got was, you're a constant drip. Oh my gosh. The things I did with the energy and the enthusiasm and the hope I had in that first marriage just burned me out, unfortunately. But the Lord is restoring that. And so, the Bible says the Lord will restore the years the locusts have eaten. And I want to tell you, that is a very true statement. That is, you look at Lot, who lost everything, and then God replenished him. And it's not like you're willing to get rid of what you had for something new. You're not. That's not at all how it is. But the reality is, in order for you to be used by God, in order for the light that He put in you that needs to shine brightly, but perhaps is ended up in a narcissistic relationship where there's just snuffing of the light all the time. Criticism, gathering a group of people to joke and laugh and put you down, and slander and all the stuff. Calling you holier than thou or whatever they do. I don't even know. But the one thing, unfortunately, that's also a part of abuse is they will provoke you for an uncharacteristically, for me, it was an explosion. It's an uncharacteristic behavior. I have a friend whose family provokes her into silence, into just shutting down and not being able to communicate because of the toxicity that is being presented in an effort to hurt her, because that's the habit. That's how it's always been. And so when they, they see you and they're like, okay, let's see if we can still hurt her. Let's see if we still have the dynamic going on. And I'll tell you, I don't have that going on in my life at all. I have detached from every single individual who couldn't see my reality and say, hey, yo, that's gotta hurt. I'm here for you. Because everyone I knew before I came out was like, hey, you're a little crazy and we're gonna go stand with that other team. And it's astounding the amount of people that did that. But now that I'm recovered, they're probably thinking like, oops, oh, maybe I didn't make the right decision there. Maybe I could have been more loving. Maybe I could have been more present. You don't have to believe an abuse victim. I'm not asking you to believe me, but certainly you can acknowledge someone's reality. Even if they've been made out to be crazy and you've heard all the crazy things they've ever done, and you've even seen them have a central nervous system explosion because maybe their mother was prodding them to do that in public so she could sit around a bridge table and be like, see, she's crazy. So she could feel better about herself, because that's how a lot of people were living a long time ago and through generations, and maybe that kind of stuff gets passed down through families. But I personally am just a little bit of a different individual, and I'm not going to go hurt somebody to feel better about myself. First of all, I'm the one that was hurt so bad, I could not hurt another person. I cannot hurt another person. I do hurt people, I'm sure, and I'm so sorry if I've ever hurt you. I am so sorry, especially as I reflect back on my flesh and the impact it had on my life. I talk often about I had an eating disorder for over probably 50 years. And that's not just like watching what you're eating and going to Weight Watchers, whatever. No, that is like when your mind's been hijacked by thinking if your body were different, your husband might love you. And then just doing everything you can to try and control your body so that you'll be loved by your partner. And the reality is, I know now in my recovery that they don't love they don't love you the way you are, they're not going to. You're not going to be able to change or lose weight or clear your skin up or, get new hair or whatever. And they're going to be like, love you? No, they can't love. So if someone's dealing with narcissistic personality disorder, they're really, really a servant of the devil. And if you are carrying the light of God, they are literally out to get you. They're out to put you out. They are, and it's so deceptive because it's people like your father or your mother or your sister or your son or your sister-in-law. Like you don't know who it is. These people, they're out to get you, and they will lie about you, and they'll go and tell your kids just obnoxious things. That was one of the frying pans I got hit on by my head with my dad. Went and told my kids something I don't even know after they knew well what the truth was. But they don't talk to me anymore. And I have recovered enough to realize that some of the loss that we have just needed to happen because some people are not in alignment with the light-bearing properties of an empath or someone who is recovering from an abusive environment. And God has told me over and over and over, look what I've taken you from. I've taken you from people that didn't value you. You had to feel like you needed to be small to be in their presence. You couldn't use your voice. You couldn't use your thought. They didn't want to know anything about you that didn't fall in line with the family propaganda or, whatever the image that's being set out about the family. And my born-again Christianism did not fit that at all. Like, we can go to church and that's great, but if you're taking Jesus too seriously, you're just, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I got myself a tattoo, a Jesus tattoo. And that's because I love him more than anything in this world. And he is the secret sauce to recovery. And he's given us a lot of tools, okay? I meditate. I really do. I meditate and I pray. I listen to scripture because if you've been traumatized, reading can be so difficult for you. But I'm going to tell you, there is so much available right now for the traumatized mind. So there's Audible, which is every book you can read in print or whatever you can listen to. And they have varying degrees of actors or voiceovers or whatever. And I'm going to do my own book, which I'm super excited about. But that is a really great way. I go back, I listen to the classics and all the things that I missed because I was too traumatized to learn at the time when I was like in survival mode, being criticized by my family, no support, teased for things I did that other people didn't do. It just teased relentlessly, led to believe I was a burden, led to believe my presence was, unwanted, honestly, just, fine. They would spend time with me, but it was a real sacrifice, it felt like. So that went on for a long time because that didn't just, that's kind of my role in the family. Anyway, but now I'm not even remotely associated with any of it. And so it has hurt like having my skin ripped off. But I've also recovered, and I've learned that I needed to go through the loss of my 4 sons. Which I can just tell you, I'm an empath, right? So I've got I don't feel, most people might feel here, and I'm just like, a major feeler. So those kind of pains were like almost unsurvivable. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I did survive it. And so now I'm like, okay, I can survive the loss of my children. I can survive anything. No one has anything on me. That's it. Like I'm very transparent about what I've been through, my eating disorder, my abortion, all the things that were really traumatic in my life that I needed to hide or thought, my public image didn't I don't have that anymore. And so I'm just like, I'm fully transparent with it all. So there's really nothing to hold over me, which is fabulous. And it's just empowering, and I'm not scared. I think, people are going to be really mad at me, a lot of abusers, because I'm going to be one of the sources to empower their victims and help victims understand that what you think is normal, you know it's not right. You know it's not love. But at the same time, you're every time you would ask your abuser like for more, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm already giving you this. What possibly do you want? You are so needy. You're so sensitive. You're so this, you're so that. And then you're just like, man, I really suck as a person. And you just start to believe it. And then they're just like, then they just respect you less and less. And you're just like, and they're like, ugh. And then they go around and they highlight your littleness to the community so that when you reach your bottom, which you will, if you survive it, a lot of people don't. When you leave, nobody will believe you. Not a soul, not a single soul. And they will align against you. And that is the first real heart circumcision that you go through when you leave an abusive marriage. You realize, oh my gosh, these people really don't value me. And they don't. They don't, and they never did. And that's honestly because you have been vibing with a crowd that is not the right frequency for you. Their frequency is different, and they don't have the feeling stuff going on, and they're not able to see the abuse, etc. And so that's just like, okay, I'm in a new place now. I'm leaving that. Where am I going? Oh, I'm actually going somewhere better. I'm going somewhere where people are healthier, where, it's not a lot of toxicity. There's not a lot of chaos. I'm going into peace, which is very, very uncomfortable when chaos has been your salvation, for lack of a better word. Even as a Christian, right? Even as a Christian, I had to have the chaos around because the stillness would freak me out. I didn't want to know my reality. And if I could keep myself busy and focused on the next thing, well, then there would be no opportunity to feel reality. And I had a lot of money. And so I was able to just keep myself distracted with tricks, trips, and activities and just never be still. And now I can assure you, my main form of obedience is stillness. He's told me, he's like, I want you to be still. And I'm like, oh, it's so uncomfortable. And he's like, I know it is. That's why I'm calling you to it. And what I've learned is that I'll obey him no matter what he says. I will obey him. And so he said to go into stillness. Okay, well, I will, but I don't like it. And so when I get in that uncomfortable position in my stillness, guess what I do? I go to him and I'm like, I don't like this. And then he loves on me. Sometimes he uses my Bible or, whatever it is, but he just comes back and he loves on me and he's like, see, this is why I wanted you still. I wanted you still so that you could feel my love to fuel you to move further into whatever it is I'm calling you to do and further away from a chaotic past, an environment where chaos was needed because stillness was frightening, right? And so I am going through this new process of learning stillness and letting go. And I wanted to really share it with you. And I wanted to share with you some of the byproducts of my recovery because I've been sharing a lot over the past few years, especially about when I finally got transparent about the abuse, just how painful it was to go through the trauma recovery journey. And now, when I tell you from the other side that all that pain was necessary, every tear, and there's all these times when I'm like, oh, God's not really listening to me. Like, where are you? Or especially in my first marriage, I just felt like I was slamming my head against a wall over and over and over, begging God for this marriage. And what I learned was he didn't really, that wasn't really where he wanted me. And so after like separating and getting back together, I finally was like, what do you want? I've tried everything to be a perfect wife. What in the world do you want? And he's like, you can leave. What? Like, everybody's like, you can't leave. You can't. You got to stay together. You blah, blah, blah. And God's like, no, you can leave. Okay. Really? Don't you hate divorce? And no, you can leave. Because he'd seen it all. He'd seen all my effort and the lack of meeting me or anything, and just heard the things, seen the thoughts, known the process, known all the stuff that was going on that I couldn't see because I was living with rose-colored glasses on in an altered reality. So when you're in survival mode, which is what happens in abuse, if you're going to survive abuse, it's going to happen through survival mode. And part of that is it's a series of things that are altered from the reality that you believe. So like people talk about people with rose-colored glasses on. So I would take my situation and make it into something wonderful because I needed that to survive. It wasn't. But I would take, there in an abuse, there is good times. And so those are very, very important to keep the abuse going. So it'll confuse the victim, and they'll be like, wait, I thought, oh yeah, no, that's over. And then you start to trust them, and then bam, they come after you again. And it's just over and over. And that's what we call complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's post-traumatic stress disorder, which is an event that just stings your central nervous system, and you don't have a place to go and recover, or you don't recover, or whatever. It just, it takes over your life. Unfortunately, CPTSD is something that is repeated, and that is what happens in abuse. So a victim gets stung by the abuser, and then they're mocked or whatever for complaining about it or bringing it up, or they're just don't, how dare you? How dare you not support me and not back me? And it's just awful, right? And so it just happens over and over and over again until that victim is like, something's wrong with me. I'm really bad. They mistreat me, and I deserve it. And so that's been a real hard thing. But my second marriage, see, what happened was God said you could leave. And then I spent like 5 months really pouring into recovery and prayer. And my gosh, I went to like church and morning mass and every single thing. I went to meetings